Good morning, everyone. I think we are all in and hopefully you can hear us. Welcome to our online event called Digging Dinosaurs Tales from the Field. This is a free event that we are putting on especially for the Australian Heritage Festival, which opens today in New South Wales, and it will go for the next month. This is a great opportunity for us to share incredible stories and histories from all around the country. And this year's topic or theme for the event is unearthed, which is why all of our paleontology related events that we are hosting will hopefully be of great interest to you because we definitely get to uncover some very cool things in this field. My name is Sally Hurst, and I will be your host for today's discussion. I'm joining you from Wallumattagal country in Sydney, New South Wales, and I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of these lands, waters, and skies that we are very privileged to live and work on. As paleontologists, a lot of our work is out on country, exploring the landscape and looking into the deep time history of our environment. Many of the sites that we are lucky enough to work upon are still intact and preserved today, thanks to the enduring connection to country and care of that country by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. Australia always was and always will be Indigenous land. We thank you for joining us this morning. Before we dive right into all things digging up dinosaurs, this session will be recorded, so if you or someone you know didn't quite get to see it, it will be available on the Found a Fossil YouTube page. This is also why your cameras and microphones have been turned off, as we are hoping the internet connection will hold up for us to share some very cool photos and videos. Okay, we're going to start the session by introducing ourselves and our different field sites. We've got 6 to go through, so 2 each. And then I will be posing some questions to Jake and Adele, and we'll do our best to also keep an eye on the chat. So if you are putting in any fieldwork related questions in there, hopefully we'll have some time to answer them. So to give you a little bit more of an insight into who I am, I'm Sally. I'm the creator of the Found a Fossil project. And this is a website that provides guidelines on what to do if you actually discover a fossil anywhere in Australia. It's also become my outreach business where I get to go to schools and talk all about dinosaurs and pathways into STEM. As it says up there, I am also a researcher at Macquarie University, and I also have a background in archaeology. So a lot of my research focuses on this intersection between humans and fossils over the course of history. I'm an educator at the Australian Museum, so of course I love talking about dinosaurs. And I'm also a superstar of STEM. So this is an initiative run by Science and Technology Australia, and it creates a cohort of 60 female and non-binary scientists every 2 years from around Australia to be role models for the next generation of scientists and to smash gender assumptions about what a scientist actually looks like. I was selected for this program in 2022, and being a superstar was very important to me as coming from a very small country town which didn't have a lot of role models in science. I can now contribute to being that role model for others in the community. Out of all of these things, I'm not doing a PhD and I don't have a full-time job. I have several casual jobs which help to fund these dinosaur digs, which you are about to hear about today. Now I'll pass over to Adele and she can tell you all about herself.
Thanks, Sally. Before I get into it, I just want to acknowledge that I am on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. For those of you who don't know where that is, it's sort of like the eastern suburbs outside of Naarm or Melbourne. So I'm based here, but I am a final year PhD candidate at Curtin University, which is actually in Perth. And for the past 7 and a bit years, I have been studying eastern pterosaurs from Eastern Australia, mainly material from the early to mid Cretaceous. So a lot of what I've been working on has been 100 million years old. And this project was prompted after the discovery of what was at the time the most complete pterosaur in all of Australia, outside of Winton, on Koa Country. So I'm also a research associate at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum of Natural History and Kronosaurus Corner, which is about 2.5 hour drive up the road from Winton. They're both in Queensland. I am also the host of the podcast Pals in Paleo, which is taking a bit of a break at the moment because trying to get a PhD finished is a bit stressful. And like Sally, I'm a superstar of STEM, but I am in this year's cohort, and I have a very exciting announcement to make. I was recently offered a place in the Homeward Bound project, which program, I should say. So yeah, really excited to do that. So Superstars focuses on psychom, whereas Homeward Bound focuses on leadership. But yeah, like Sally, I don't have a traditional job either. This is a weird gap year, but yeah, I'm having a wonderful time and I'm so happy to be here and talking to all of you.
I guess it's my turn. My resume is far less impressive than the two before me. G'day, I'm Jake. I'm a PhD candidate at Monash University out in Clayton in Victoria and also at Museums Victoria Research Institute. Also in my last year of my PhD. I do my PhD with a stipend, so I barely qualify as having a full-time job. Um, but for the last 3 years, I've been working on the collection of theropods, so your meat-eating dinosaurs, most meat-eating dinosaurs, from Australia. I started with the fossil record pretty much in Victoria at Melbourne Museum. But from there have branched into New South Wales and Queensland, looking at this particular group known as the megaraptors, which we'll talk quite a bit about today. Not quite raptors. They got the big claws on the hands instead of the feet, and they did very, very well in the Cretaceous of Australia. So I mainly look at early Cretaceous to mid sort of late Cretaceous megaraptors across eastern seaboard Australia. And yes, I have been found out I can quote the entire Jurassic Park movie. I guess that's the most impressive credential on this entire slide. Um, yeah, that's me.
Great, thank you, Jake. And Adele, that is insane. So congratulations on being awarded Homeward Bound. That is insane. I've been eyeing off applications for years, so I'm so glad that you got it. I can't wait to see what you do next. So for today's talk, we are going to explore the physical nature of unearthing the past by talking about some of the incredible fossil sites that the three of us have been able to visit all around the world. Where we go and dig up, it differs at every single site. So while you might be an expert at the sauropods of Queensland, you might be a complete novice when you go to a different country and look at a different fossil site. And so, speaking of the sauropods of Queensland, Adele is going to kick us off and talk about her fieldwork in Queensland. So I'm just going to give her remote control. Okay, take it away, Adele.
Awesome. Thanks, Sally. Yeah, so of all the time that I've spent out in the field, I am most comfortable and familiar with Winton, Queensland. I've spent more than 30 weeks in the field. I've helped lead digs, but I've also been helping work with the staff at the Australian Age of Dinosaurs Museum and supporting their staff, like the wonderful Mackenzie Enkelmeyer, who's also doing a master's project this year, sort of like come to understand this role. So, yeah, our digs are actually the biggest fundraisers for the year or for the museum. And we would have 13 paying participants as well as a cook help us dig up fossils. So you would have people like myself, paleontologists who would be volunteers. But our joke was always the better you ate and the better you had a beer, the better you got paid. But it was absolutely wonderful. So we would dig on sort of two different stations or farms, if you will, and you'd be out in the middle of a paddock. What we were digging up were the remains of ancient we call them oxbow lakes or billabongs. So what would happen is you would have a river channel that would go through, and then on the sides, you'd have these sort of like boggy areas. And we'd find lots of our big long neck dinosaurs, sauropods, specifically types of tyrannosaurs, would be found out around there. So that kind of gives you an idea of like the scale of what's going on. Very important, the portaloo in the back, multiple cars, a trailer that was actually used to fix windmills back in the day. And we would also use machines like a tractor or a very small Caterpillar front end loader and a little mini digger excavator, which is sort of the bluey green teal thing, to help dig up things because the rock was very, very hard. You'd have to use crowbars every now and then. But hopefully we'll get to the next slide. And I think it was last year or the year before. Oops, I might have skipped one. Oh, no. Okay. So most of the time we're digging up bones, but there have also been instances where we've dug up footprints. So what we can see in this photograph is something called the Snake Creek track site. And these are a series of footprints and successive tracks. So a track site, one after the other, left, right, of big long-necked dinosaurs. So there is at least three, I think four individuals here, and they're all walking in the same direction at about the same time. But then you might notice there's a few people in this photograph, and they've actually applied latex onto some of the smaller tracks as well. So it's not just bones, there can also be footprints, but this is what I was talking about before to give you an idea of the scale of what we're dealing with. I took a little drone video. I believe it was on last year's dig. So it's very flat, open country. And we are also generally more than, it's either 60 or 80 kilometers from town. So there's the homestead. So we've also been able to set up like a dongle for access through like using your phone for data and to make phone calls. Whereas before, it's a very, very remote area. Without that infrastructure in place, you wouldn't be able to make a phone call. You'd basically be unreachable. So yes, we also just need to be very careful and make sure we've got enough first aid kits on site. Some of our sites are in creeks like this one here. This was the site that I led back in 2018, I want to say. It's where the pterosaur that I ended up naming was found. This is me trying to do my best to map things, and then I eventually gave up because, again, it's in a creek, and some of the bones that we had found at the surface had actually been kicked into position by livestock. Fortunately, it was the sheep and not the cows, because otherwise they would have done a lot of damage. So on the video on the right, you can also see an example of what the bone looks like at the surface. So in terms of getting our dig sites started, normally what happens is a local grazier will find bone at the surface, and then we try and map out or flag using, honestly, like the pegs that come with your tent. We put some like little pink fluorescent tape on them, and we sort of put a stake in the ground for every bone fragment that's found. So we get an idea of if there's a pattern to the distribution of that material. So then we have a plan of attack of, how we want to dig. And basically the idea is to then dig down and find a bone using screwdrivers, brushes, little scoops, trying to be careful. But again, crowbars sometimes come out to dig through that harder, sticky clay. So, yeah. Here's an example of one of the bones that was found on one of our digs. It's a rather large leg bone or femur from a sauropod. It's about as big as I am, and I'm 165 centimeters tall. So yeah, they're absolutely huge. And the reason why this is the most common type of dinosaur that we find out in Winton is because those fragments at the surface, they're a lot easier to spot when they're bigger. And because of the rotational soil, basically, if you start with a big bone and then it gets broken up through the self-mulching process, you are still able to have nice big hand-sized chunks. Whereas if you start off with a bone that's very little, By the time it makes its way up to the surface, it's basically destroyed. So for a long time, it was thought that the bones at the surface were what's called lag deposits, and that everything had been eroded away and then the bone had been exposed through that process. But actually, what happens in Winton is you have this sort of washing machine cycle soil that makes contact with fossils and then brings them up to the surface. So the idea is if you find some stuff at the surface and you dig down, hopefully you can find material and reconnect it all together. Oh, same image twice. Good job, Dell. Okay, we've already seen this. I also had the amazing opportunity in 2023 to travel to Brazil with my two PhD supervisors, Dr. Stephen Porapat and Professor Cleety Grice, both of the Western Australian Isotope and Organic Geochemistry Centre at Curtin University, to go to Brazil. So Cleety is really interested in exceptional fossil preservation. So instances where you can find skin and soft tissues, and really fascinated with understanding the chemical reactions, the chemical processes that led to these incredible fossils. So Brazil is famous for its incredible array of like fish fossils, insects, plants. You find pterosaurs as well, which is great for me. And basically you have this sort of like restricted lagoon environment that's a very deep water, and then you have like the stratified situation. So think of a layer cake and the different discrete layers. It's kind of like that, but in the water, and these different chemical reactions and processes. But yeah, it was absolutely incredible, despite the fact that I didn't have my luggage with me. All I had was carry on to do field work for a week. But it was beautiful. The people were beautiful. In this photograph, we can see Professor Alamo in the famous selfie spot, which I really hope to return to one day. But yeah, so that dig was very different. So we were mainly working with paleontologists and the research team at URCA, which is Universidade Regional do Cariri in Arepe. And here we can see we've just manually, without any machines, dug a very deep, very small hole in the ground. And in the photograph on the left, you can see Alamo showing Dr. Steve Porapat some of the fish fossils that are found. So what's really mind-blowing to me about this locality is most of their fossils from the Romualdo Formation are in what's called concretions. So these like round rocks form around the fossil, and they've actually done so many excavations and it's so well studied that they can look at the shape of the concretion, not see any fossil exposed, but know exactly what species of fish is inside just based on the shape. It's absolutely incredible. So yeah, I also had the joy of trying to break open one of these concretions myself. It took 10 minutes. And I did manage to make my hand bleed because I smacked myself with the geopick. Still have the scar to prove it, but it was well worth it because we had this beautiful fish skull. So we have part and counterpart. And it was so nice that they didn't let us have that one for study. But we are collaborating with them. So we're not going into Brazil and taking their fossils. Like, that's really bad. So from the get-go, before we organized this trip, it was like, we want to collaborate with you. We want to have like this ongoing relationship, and they've been absolutely wonderful to work with. And it wouldn't have been possible without Professor Alexander Kellner, who is the director of Museu Nacional, the National Museum of Brazil. He also made that happen. So big shout outs to Alex. Here's some more examples of our fossil fish. So you can have whole specimens. You can see their scales as well. The scales are quite shiny as well. So they're very like distinct in the field. But this is at the museum in Cariri, which I highly recommend people go to. And I mentioned insect fossils before. So we had the opportunity to tour around some quarries. These limestone slabs are used in the construction of houses still today. And one of the workers caught wind of the fact that we're paleontologists and interested in this stuff, and yeah, handed us this beautiful little dragonfly wing. But yeah, in another instance, we also had these thin sheets of limestone, and I can honestly say it's the first and might be the only time I ever use a fossil as an umbrella. So yeah, absolutely unique experience. More examples of fossil fish there. A lot of them are quite small, and they are very abundant. So this wall is at the museum in Karari, but they are looking to rebuild Musea Nacional after the fire that devastated it, and they're going to try and have one of these there as well. So yeah, really looking forward to it and heading back to Brazil one day. But I'll now hand over to Jake and let him talk about some other field work.
I think we'll figure it out. I'll see
Yeah,
if I can
just let
click through
me.
a second.
Okay, I'm going to stop Adele's remote control and change it to Jake.
Apparently I can control. Awesome. All
Okay,
right.
give it a go.
Cool. I'm going to talk about probably one of the best offices in the world. This is a beautiful drone shot of the Bass Coast in Victoria, where we find the oldest Cretaceous dinosaurs in Australia. We have stuff from the Jurassic, but that's out in WA. This is the kind of the oldest site in what I work on. So in Victoria, we kind of work on two major sites, the Otway Coast, which is Eastern Marland, and here the Bass Coast, which is Boonwurrung Country. And here we have these exposed outcrops of Cretaceous rock that are sitting at the edge on the coastlines in Victoria. So when you actually have a really nice day, it is one of the best places to work. I've done most, if not all, of my work on the Bass Coast, part of the Dinosaur Dreaming Project, the longest running dinosaur dig in Australia. More than 40 years of digging here. And we find evidence of polar dinosaurs. We're kind of on the other spectrum of the stuff that Adele's found in Winton, where they're finding sauropods with bones larger than her. Here we're finding little tiny fragments of bones, and it's a lot of effort for sometimes not that much. We're looking at an environment of about 122 to 118 million years old here in the Bass Coast. And it's at a time where Australia has started to rift away from Antarctica and the rest of Gondwana, that supercontinent that the dinosaurs dispersed through. And we're starting to pull apart from Tasmania as well and move towards where we are today. And in this environment, we have this large, deep rift valley that's got a massive flowing river through it. Think of the Amazon, think of the Ganges. This is something at least a kilometre across minimum and minimum 30 metres deep. And we know that based on tree fossils we've seen in these deposits. Here we find lots of small bones. We do find footprints, and there's quite a few ways we find these things. Majority of the fossils we find here are ornithopods, your small bipedal herbivorous dinosaurs. But we also see theropods, we also see ankylosaurs, we see turtles, and we find mammals, some of the earliest known mammals in Australia. Let's see if this is going to work. I've got a little highlighted thing that I can zoom in. I think this might work. No, I just zoomed in the screen. I don't know what I've done, so it just made me zoom. I don't know what's wrong with my screen. Sorry.
You are controlling the mouse. So hang on, just stop moving it for a sec. I'll see if I can fix it.
Sorry, I'm bad at technology.
Okay, is it good now?
Let's see if I can click through.
Hurrah.
Yeah, I think so. Awesome. Sorry, cool. Right, so we kind of have a lot of our fossils are on these exposed shore platforms that are tide dependent. So our digs, we try and do them in February, and we'll go for a couple of weeks at a time, minimum 15 people a week. And we'll go for a couple of weeks at a time, just depending on people's availability and how long they want to spend out there. But minimum, you'll stay for a week at a time. A typical day out on the Bass Coast, we'll be staying at our lovely dig house. You'll either be, depending on whether you're a veteran or not, you'll get a room or you'll get to camp out the back. And we'll get up nice and early, make your sandwiches, make your brekkie, bring a thermos down, bring our snacks down. It's a very well-oiled machine, and we'll set up on the beach. We'll block out an area, wait for the tide to recede, and we'll start digging into the rock. We also do a lot of prospecting. This is me on the left prospecting at a recent site that I published some material from, trying to find more of our of a specific dinosaur I'll talk about a bit later. And we also do find things in kind of like these concretions, these nodules that have specimens in them. So there's quite a few ways to find fossil stuff down on the Basque Coast. Please click through. There we go. So the first kind of way is our shore platforms. We'll be going in, there'll be 4 or 5 people who will play in the hole. And there'll be a hole that we've dug from. We'll have to get all the water out of it. And we'll go in with crowbars, with chisels, picks, whatever we need, and sometimes even industrial rock saws to cut through this stuff because it is effectively cement. It's a bit wet, so it's a little bit easy to cut through, but it is very dense, very strong. And it's helping preserve these fossils, but at the same time, making it very hard to get these fossils out. So we'll get these bits of rock out, doing our best to avoid cutting through a fossil, but it happens. And we'll take it back to people. You can see everyone in this photo on the left. In the background, the rest of the workers will be sitting around on these nice comfy rocks on the beach, and you'll get a bucket, and you'll get your rock that we've cut out of the hole, and you'll sit there and you'll chisel it apart, and you'll look for tiny little fossils in it. You'll look for anything from dinosaur teeth to mammal jaws to turtle skulls to sometimes claws. If you're lucky, you'll get parts of a skull, and just try and find anything we can. And so we started digging this new site as of last year, and it's been quite productive. We're finding a lot of turtle and a lot of ornithopod. Not so much theropod, but fossils are fossils. And so examples of things we'll find in these digs is something like the Otway claw, and I have a nice replica here so you can see kind of how big it is. And as you can see here on the right towards the tip, this was cut through with a saw. So it does happen. We can patch these things together, but we have this beautifully preserved claw that we can dig out of shore platforms and these kind of conglomerations of fossils. Now, with this environment, we've got this large river. It's constantly flowing. When an animal would die, it would fall in, kind of get bashed apart and disarticulated. So we find a lot of evidence of an animal typically as one bone or a fragmentary bone. We don't get a lot of associated fossils because of this high energy environment. There are points kind of on like the riverbanks where we do sometimes find a bit more articulated specimens, but they're pretty far and few between. So that claw belongs to something of a group of dinosaurs called a megaraptor. The megaraptor is specifically what I focus on, and they seem to be the apex predators in Victoria, probably the rest of Australia as far as we can tell. But this is kind of just a depiction of that riverine environment down in Victoria. We've got a large megaraptor hunting those small ornithopods. Second way we find fossils is back at the dig house. Anything that we don't process down on the beach, we carry back up the staircase. It's quite a long walk with a lot of heavy material, and often I'm one of the people carrying the heavy material. We'll stick them in the cars and we'll drive them back to the dig house where we'll have a nice tarp, some chairs set up, and we'll all sit around and we'll process the rest of the rock. Again, looking for any small fossils we can. You'll get to have cups of tea, you'll get to have lunch, there'll be a quiz. It's a really great time. It's honestly not what you think a dinosaur dig is. And then when we do find something, we try our best to figure out what it is. Here's me on the right, not knowing what a fossil is. I think it wound up being a piece of skull, but it was just really fragmentary and not very helpful. So this is where we'll start to collect anything we find that we think is worth retaining. We'll parcel it up, we'll retain it. Leslie, one of our dig leaders, will often take them back to her house where she'll prepare them, get as much matrix out as she can, and then send them off to the museum where they will be cared for and hopefully one day studied, particularly the better fossils. And when we're doing this rock breaking, we're looking for some really small and really nice fossils. Like this partial ornithopod jaw, we find a lot of teeth at times, but sometimes you get lucky and find skull bits. And these jaws are kind of the sturdiest part of these ornithopods' skulls, which is why we get so many of them. We get less of the rest of the skull. And this is just another depiction of kind of the ornithopods that we got in the environment. You can see this large river, these things on the riverbanks. And then the last way we find things is prospecting. We'll go along the sites where we know fossils are, and we have a superstar, Melissa Lowry, who has just been, she's a freak in the best sense of the term. She is eagle eyes and will find some of the smallest, best preserved things in the least expected places, particularly on this site on the left, a place called Twin Reefs. Melissa managed to spot, well, this. in part of a large boulder, which doesn't really look like much, but after 6 months actually was exposed to the bottom of a theropod leg. And this actually is one of the largest known dinosaurs in one of the largest known theropods in Australia, maybe one of the largest in Victoria, even too, another megaraptor. And this is the kind of stuff that leads to this ongoing research. We're finding different ways to find all these fossils and bring them together to understand what this environment looked like. And then we'll go another different kind of dig altogether out in Lightning Ridge. Now, Lightning Ridge is a place in New South Wales, right up north near the border with Queensland. It's one of the only places on Earth where you find, I'm pretty sure the only place on Earth where you find opalized dinosaur fossils in this precious opal. This is a site that's a bit younger than mine. It's late Cretaceous, around the 100 to 96 million year old mark. It's kind of forested plains near the shore of the inland sea, the Eromanga Sea, as it's starting to recede. And it's actually quite deep underground. So this is sort of a double-edged sword. These opalized fossils are found by miners who are coming in to look for opal to sell and make a living. But sometimes they find fossils. Now, sometimes the opal is not great quality and the fossil can be retained. Sometimes the fossil is very good. The opal is really good quality, and so we'll never see that fossil. But we wouldn't know about these fossils without those miners. The way that the Lightning Ridge dig operates is that, so this is just an example of some of the fossils that you can find. So you got parts of toes, you got teeth, you got jaws, lots of shells, all these kind of aquatic environments being preserved in this beautiful opal. Now, the way that the Opal Center dig works is that we collect offcuts from miners, this sort of rock that they don't find any precious opal in, and they've processed already, and they'll donate it to the museum. And we'll go and we'll sit outside on a blistering 38-degree day in the middle of August. It kind of looks like the Winton environment, and we'll sort through these piles of fossil, look at these kind of piles of rock, looking for fossils. Sometimes you break them up, but sometimes you can just see the opal preserved, and we'll try and identify any important fossils. There have been things found as small as tiny little pterosaur teeth, 2 claws, 2 jaws, and everything in between. A lot of shells too. There is also a potential to go into opal mines and actually look for fossil, but those are far and few between. So most of the the Opal Center dig is sitting around on tables, again, having a chat, sorting through piles, trying to find whatever you can, going to the tumblers where miners are actually sorting through their rock, and you'll be able to search for opal with them. At times you will find fossils. So it's a bit more of a different kind of dig. Cool, that's all my ones.
Amazing. Thank you, Jake. I'm gonna take that control. Okay. So my field sites are not in Australia. I've been very lucky to work with Adele and Jake down on the Bass Coast earlier in February and go to Lightning Ridge a few times too. But my love and some of the best dinosaurs, I think, are up in Canada, so a little bit further away. So my first field site is called Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie, if you are familiar at all with Canada, you've got Alberta, which is very famous for the Canadian Rockies, those mountains. In the middle of Alberta, you've got Edmonton, and then another 5 hours to the northwest, you've got this little town called Grand Prairie. And it has deposits which are also late Cretaceous, so 80 to 68 million years old. Its environment today, which is in this picture, it has these very big kind of muddy rivers, is actually very similar to what the paleo environment would have been back in the Cretaceous. So it's quite cool that a lot of the kind of tree species that we're seeing is quite similar to what the dinosaurs would have been seeing all that time ago. And this site is quite special because it's one of the densest dinosaur bone beds in the world. So while Victoria is, little bits of scraps of bones here and there, Grand Prairie is the thickest dinosaur soup you can imagine. So one of the very famous species that comes out of this area is our pachyrhinosaurs. These are part of the ceratopsian family, so they've got this very distinctive frill, and many, many individuals have come out of these bone beds. Sometimes we'll find a single skull piece like this. Other times, this is a cast of some articulated bones that were discovered together. Um, but this is an example of a meter square that we were mapping. And so it is just bones upon bones upon bones. You really couldn't move or try and excavate any of these bones without accidentally finding another one. So it was pretty tricky. And generally, what you do is like, okay, we find one bone, let's take it out, put it to the museum, and then, oh, we've got another one right underneath it. Let's draw that one in as well. So on this map, it's quite hard to see, but underneath all of these smaller bones was actually the skull of a pachyrhinosaurs. It's known as Big Sam. And when they excavated it, so I was there in August last year. It came out in September, and it is so far the heaviest and the largest pachyrhinosaur skull that's ever been discovered. So even in amongst all the dinosaur soup, you do get some pretty amazing specimens. Now, Grand Prairie was also very different to any other kind of fieldwork I had been on. You'll see when I talk about my second site, Dinosaur Provincial Park, which is what my background is, it's very desert-like environments. It's quite dry, it's quite hot. And when I came to Grand Prairie, there was very few details on what the dig was going to be like. Someone said, oh, you'll get a little bit muddy and, it'll be quite different from Dinosaur Provincial Park, but you'll be fine. Don't worry about it. I didn't know where I was going to stay up until 2 weeks before the dig. I was already in Canada at this point, and really had no idea what to expect. And so my first day was spent bush bashing several kilometers down these very steep hills and riverbanks, because right on the river's edge is generally where you find these big sandstone rocks that have dropped down from the higher up in the riverbank, and inside those is where we find these dinosaur bones. And so we would be bashing through these wild Alberta roses, which are covered in thorns. You would obviously have to watch out for other risks like getting stuck in the mud. Sometimes you would just put your foot down and you would go knee deep into very thick mud. And we are also deep in grizzly bear country. So anytime you're on one of these digs, you generally have a line of people, and multiple people every few minutes are yelling out, "Hey bear," to make sure that if there is a bear in the area, it gets scared away before you get there. Fortunately or unfortunately, we didn't see any bears on the dig. This is a photo from a few weeks before when I was traveling around other parts of Canada and we were purposefully looking for bears. But yes, there was definitely a few cases where you're like, we are very far from any civilization. A bear would win in this fight, essentially. The dig sites also look quite different day to day. So I was there for about 10 days and I don't think we visited the same site on any of those days. So we would have these individual bone beds, and again, the river is right on the edge here, so you had to be careful as you were flinging mud behind you not to fling yourself into the river. It only happened once and we got over it very quickly. But yes, a lot of the time you are just plunging your hands into this mud because it's easier than trying to use the shovels. And each day you might have to clear the mud, the top layer off to get to the bones below, where we'd work in layers to try and get down to some dinosaur levels. Other times, similar to Dell, we might have a farmer contact us saying that they had found something in the riverbank. So this bone on the right-hand side is a really big rib bone that was just sticking out of the wall, and it's really beautifully preserved. But this rock above it was like cement. So I think there was me and another woman, Caroline, we spent hours just trying to chip away this rock so we could actually take it back with us. I think another team had to go back a week later with some heavier tools to try and get it. But at the same time, they were hoping it was articulated a little bit further in. It doesn't look like it is. It's just a single bone. So it might be that they decided just to leave it there. In Australia, this would be an excellent specimen and 100% we'd want to collect it. But Canada has so many amazing fossils that they can afford to leave them out there in the field. Another favourite site of mine that we got to visit was known as Deadfall. This is called that because all of the forest around you, often trees would fall down, they'd rot away, and so they had a lot of this deadfall. But along this little riverbank, so you see me crossing the river, many a pair of shoe was sacrificed for finding these fossils. But we would have a lineup of people on this far riverbank, and we had person who immediately pulled out this very nice tyrannosaur tooth. Someone else was working on a pachyrhinosaur pelvis. Someone else is working on a skull. And I was assigned to uncover these two enormous femurs from a hadrosaur. So we actually had 5 femurs all in a row, so definitely more than one dinosaur. And you can see how massive they are. Now, Canada also has a bit more of a commercial fossil budget compared to places like Australia. So because we were so isolated where we were, we would actually jacket these, so cover them in plaster to protect them. We would uncover them so they'd fully excavated, and then they're a bit too heavy to pick up. So sometimes they would either try and get a boat down the river. This one was a little bit too shallow for that. So instead, they actually have a helicopter that they can use to put these bones in essentially a big net and airlift them out back to the local museum. Sometimes where they find these amazing dinosaur fossils is in places like oil mines. And so the miners are very much like, we're losing money, we need to get this out quick. It's cheaper for them to front the cost for a helicopter than it is for them to stop mining for an extra few days to truck it out of there. So they've got some pretty amazing things. And speaking of amazing things, my favorite place probably in the whole world is Dinosaur Provincial Park. So this is another Canadian site. This one is in southern Alberta as well. It's a little bit more restrained. So they've got, again, good enough rocks, good enough fossils that it's between 74 and 76 million years old. So again, like Cretaceous, this is a lot of quite well-known tyrannosaurs, triceratops, and ankylosaurs. Dinosaurs you're quite familiar with are coming out of these dinosaur beds. Again, once upon a time, it used to be like Grand Prairie in that it had these big, lazy, meandering rivers. But we think instead of mixing things in to be a dinosaur soup, they had events that were on a scale of something like Hurricane Katrina. So these huge storm cells that dumped a lot of water that buried dinosaurs or drowned them very quickly. And so we get quite a number of mass death assemblages, where originally we thought we had 30 dinosaurs over here, 50 dinosaurs over here. We actually think that this was a bit of a mega herd, so something akin to the Great Migration of wildebeest in Africa. So hundreds or thousands of individuals that got wiped out in this event, and all of these bone beds are actually connected. And because there are so many dinosaurs here, they've got over 50 species that have been named just from this park. It's one of the richest dinosaur bone beds in the world, and about 5% of all dinosaurs known are found just in this park. So to give you an idea of how rich it is, when you are walking across this park, you are literally tripping over dinosaur bones. This is a dinosaur limb bone just sticking out at one of the cliff walls. You've got these really beautiful claws that, again, they're just sitting on the ground. And then sometimes you'll have these little micro sites where the surface scatter is just a mixture of everything that was in that environment. So dinosaur soup, but on a smaller scale. But you've got things like raptor teeth and croc teeth, turtle scoots and bones. These are bits and pieces from hadrosaurs and ceratopsians. This is part of a horn. And so just all these different things are all mixed in together. One of the highlights from the 2023 field season was that we got to assist in uncovering this very cool fossil. It doesn't look like much. A lot of the time it looks like a rock. It would be quite easy to miss. But once we uncovered it and took it back to the museum, it's actually this really beautiful tail club from an ankylosaur, so a club-tailed dinosaur. And just to give you a bit of a scale, this is one that's a similar size next to me. and that's how big it is. So these were enormous animals. And again, these tail clubs are just so dense, they preserve quite well. So I might not find the rest of the skeleton, but we can find these amazing tail clubs. As part of me going over there, it's a field school which is run by the University of Reading in the UK in conjunction with the Royal Tyrrell Museum of Paleontology in Alberta. I was able to go over there because Dr. Phil Bell from the University of New England is a co-collaborator on this field school, so he's one of the teachers. And he brought me along 1 year kind of as a student, and he's never been able to get rid of me since. So I've been over there twice before, and I'll be heading back in July. And one of the absolute highlights of this trip is getting to go behind the scenes in the Royal Tyrrell Museum. And so we get to see my favorite dinosaur, which is Pachycephalosaurus, and these other incredible tyrannosaur species, raptors, or other theropods, and this really gorgeous mummified ankylosaur as well. One of the best days that we got to spend in the park was prospecting. So as Jake explained, we honestly just go for a walk, see what you can find on the surface or sticking out. And on one of these days, I actually discovered an articulated dinosaur. So behind me, you've got one of these femurs or leg bones, and then you can actually follow the dinosaur across behind me to have the different ribs, neck bones, vertebra, and that kind of thing. Now, again, in Australia, this would be one of the best preserved dinosaurs we had ever found. We would collect it immediately. It would be very important to our understanding. I was told that, oh, sorry, Sally, we've got about 6 other hadrosaurs that are better preserved than this one. So we're just going to leave it there. Just don't worry about it. So that's how good these fossils are in Canada, much to my disgust that I couldn't take this dinosaur home. But also you can find things like these incredible trackways and footprints just littered on the surface. And we found more last year that is in press, and it's a very cool site that we'll share. The risks at this site are a little bit different to bears. Instead, we had to deal with rattlesnakes. Often they would have dens quite close to sites that we were digging up. And of course, cacti. So poor Taylor rolled under one of the fences, and it was the only cactus along the fence, but he managed to get it. And so a little bit different to what kind of things we might find on other dinosaur digs. The last part of this dig I'll share is something called the Casky Hadrosaur. So this was a tailbone of a dinosaur, so sticking out of one of these cliffs or geological structures like this called hoodoos. And as you can see, it has this pebbly skin preserved on top, which is quite rare. And we were hoping that because the tail was the only thing that's exposed, the rest of the dinosaur would still be encased in the hoodoo, meaning that we might have a whole body, a whole 3D mummified, I guess, corpse of this little juvenile hadrosaur. This is what a hadrosaur looks like for reference. They are known as the duck-billed dinosaurs. They're the dinosaurs that invented chewing, equivalent of cows, pretty much. They moved in family groups and they were just big and possibly quite lumbering. But yeah, so this is what the site looked like when they first discovered it. You can just see that the tailbone and I think one of the forearms is sticking out. And hopefully it would be stretched in a straight line that we only have to remove a little bit of dirt to access the skeleton. Not so. It turns out that we had to begin a pretty big production of getting this dinosaur out. We firstly covered it with plaster to protect it because we had to knock all of this rock down. And we had to cover it in jackets again to protect it. So when we did eventually start getting jackhammers and knocking down this hoodoo, the dinosaur inside would be protected. Now, again, we're kind of in the middle of nowhere and there's not many good roads out here, so we couldn't really get a digger. So all of this was done with jackhammers. These guys from the museums would rappel down this cliff, jackhammers in hand, and they'd be harnessed in knocking the rock down. And we would then spend many hours of each afternoon removing all of this rock. And so by the time the 2 weeks were over in 2023, We had moved about 70 tons of rock just with shovels and wheelbarrows. So this is what the dig site looked like at the end of 2023. And on the right is what it looked like after 2024. So again, they moved a lot of rock. We've got the dinosaur just in this little slab now. But the next issue is that it's too big to fit inside the doors of the museum. So they might actually have to decapitate it and bring it in two parts. It's also, once the jacket eventually covers the whole piece of rock, it's going to be about 25 tons, which is a bit too big for many trucks that can actually fit around the corners of the national park. It's also too heavy for many of the helicopters that they normally use. So they'd have to bring in like a military grade helicopter from across the Rocky Mountains, which is a logistical nightmare. So I'm glad that's not my problem. So hopefully when we head back in July, we will be able to get the dinosaur out. And then it will be another several years until we can actually prep it in the lab to see if there is a mummified dinosaur inside. So hopefully this has given you a really good idea of all the different dinosaur field sites that you might come across all around the world. They're all different. Now, if any of you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll be able to get to them. But otherwise, I also have some questions for Jake and Adele. Jake, there is a question for you in the chat, which is it possible to speculate the population density there would have been for megaraptors compared to other dinosaurs like ornithopods?
It's kind of a hard question because I guess there's a good saying, and it's the best fossil you have, the best fossil there is the one you have. And so it might just be a collection bias. We might just collect so many more Megaraptor stuff because it's rarer and there's so many ornithopods that we just don't collect. I mean, there's a lot of material that we collect and we don't keep. A lot of them will be just the shaft of a limb, which unfortunately isn't really informative. The best parts of a limb are the ends where we see they attach to other bones. So, I mean, yes and no. You could speculate, but there might be a collection bias or a preservation bias, environmental bias. Like we have a strong push towards small fossils, usually something no bigger than that. And it was really rare to find those big theropod fossils I published on recently because they came out of a thicker rock. So I would hesitate and say probably not at the minute until we start getting better fossils. When you get things out of places like Grand Prairie and Dinosaur Provincial Park, you got a lot better stuff to work with. And you can kind of tell because you're getting, not only are you getting so many, but you're also often getting growth series of these animals. So you can tell what they look like through time. You can tell when you can kind of guess at population size. And with work, I'm trying to figure out storms and massive herds. You can kind of get a bit more population density. So I would hesitate no in Victoria for now, but we're still collecting and it might be a possibility in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you. What, for both of you, you can talk about this. What is the coolest thing that you have found or helped to find?
You go.
Ooh. Yeah. I have been lucky enough to find like a beautiful femur or thigh bone from a sauropod, which was very exciting. But the one where I was just bouncing off the walls, you couldn't wipe the smile off my face. I was grinning like an idiot for probably like 2 hours. Was when I found a sauropod tooth. So, um, their teeth are probably about yay big when they're complete. A lot of that is root. So the root being the part that's in the jaw. And I happened to find it after another paleontologist had dumped their rock. And it was in these big chunks. And I saw it and I recognized that it was different to any of the other rock that had been found at the site. And it was very coarse grained. So the size of the grit was like a little bit bigger than everything else. And that just like sent alarm bells off in my head because to me, like a high energy environment means you might have a better chance of something getting washed in. So I raced over, grabbed a bunch of chunks and it broke away beautifully. I was wet sieving it in this big, like 500 liter poly tub, which farmers use for stock lick. And yeah, just this beautiful shiny tooth was exposed. And it was only that much. And yeah, I was bouncing off the walls. I still have the video of that. So yeah, that was the best thing that I found. And I got to be part of the paper that described it too. So I normally don't find things and then work on them. I've never found a pterosaur fossil that I've then described. So that, yeah, was really special.
Nice, thank you. Jake?
I am really bad in the field. I have terrible luck, and I have not found anything myself. I've helped pull some things out, but I've not actually found anything personally. The best one then that I found is actually quite a well-preserved large turtle shell at our new site. Just before we started digging there, Melissa spotted some stuff on the shore platform, and so a team of us from the museum went out to collect it. And there was this kind of long exposed bit that I took the rock saw to. I'm like, okay, it's going down this way. I'll just cut around it, and I gave it a wide berth, but it was going this way, and I cut right through the shell. Thankfully, there's still enough of it that we can tell what it is, but under this turtle shell was another one and another one. So it's just this kind of like bone bed of turtles, which, it's not my thing, but it's still a pretty cool fossil to find. It's just a death assemblage of turtles. And some of the biggest ones we've seen too.
Someone has commented, turtles all the way down.
Pretty
Correct.
much.
Yeah,
Pretty
it was
much.
pretty
There's
insane
even a
sight.
little comic of it. It was just turtles stacked. It's great.
I think as well in the last field site when Leslie emailed us all being like, hi guys, here's, a summary of things that we found. She's like, I'm so sorry. It's all turtles.
Which
Leslie loves turtles, which is great for her.
we love when Leslie's happy because it was all turtles, but it's just like something else, please.
Yeah. Give us a theropod.
Monday.
Okay, so my next question is, was there ever a moment on field work where you had this thought of this is really dumb or dangerous or crazy? And can you share that story with us?
You want to go first, Del?
Oh, yeah, I'll twist my arm. Yeah, so there have been a few instances where when the heavy machinery's been operated, um, we had instances where participants have ignored the safety bollards that we've put out and gotten a little bit close to the arm of the excavator, or the tractor has gotten very close to participants. So yeah, haven't loved that.
Mine was twin race. I actually dragged Sally and Del and a few others out during our dig on a day where we couldn't get to site because the tides were bad. And we have kind of this sheer cliff face with these massive boulders, hundreds of kilograms in size, that have fallen off and are still falling off, which was fine because we went with hard hats and did all the safety stuff. But there was one day where I was down there and it was just me and one other person, and I got really close. I'm having a look, and I heard a crack up the top. I'm like, cool. And I left, and I don't know what happened. I don't want to find out.
Don't want to find out. Good
Don't want to
decision.
find out. Like, I'm pretty sure there's theropod in that bit, but I'm not going to wait around and find out.
Wait till it's already fallen, then go back.
Correct.
Yes, I think one of my favorite times, and it kind of happened twice, was I was in one of the mines in Lightning Ridge with Phil Bell. And a baby brown snake fell into the mine. And it's like these mines are an 18-meter drop. It's like a rickety metal ladder that you have to go up and down with your little hard hat, which honestly probably isn't going to do much. But anyway, so this baby snake falls in. We're about to go for, lunch or a pee or something, and Phil notices this little snake, not realizing it was a brown snake. And Phil is a big animal lover, so he gets a hessian sack and he kind of scoops the snake into that and ties it up and takes it up with him. And then later that day, he took some photos for it, and we were doing a Google search. What kind of snake is this? Turns out it was a baby brown snake. So very, very lucky that he didn't, get bitten. That could have been bad because, again, we are in the middle of nowhere. There's not a lot of phone reception. But that all turned out fine. And then similarly, another time in Dinosaur Provincial Park, Phil and I were prospecting, and from around the corner, he'll, hey, Sally, do you like snakes? And I love snakes. I think the rattlesnakes we were finding were very cool. So I come over and he's just holding, it's a garter snake, so luckily not that venomous, but he's just like, here, hold this. And I'm just like, Phil, I don't think this is covered in the risk assessment, but I got to hold a snake, so it was very cool. But yes, it was definitely one of those times where I'm like, Why is this happening?
All right, you've convinced me not to dig with Phil.
Feels great. He never wears shoes on a dig.
He
But
never
on
wears
the whole,
shoes, period.
yeah, basically. But yes, he's fantastic and he's a complete wizard at identifying bones and things as well. Okay, now Del, I've got a question specifically for you.
Yep.
How much do we know so far about pterosaur species from around the Eromanga Sea?
Okay, hold me back or hold my beer, proverbial beer, because this is like my bread and butter. So, the pterosaur species that we have in Australia, we are up to five now. I've named two of them. They're all from the Eromanga Basin. Draco is the only one not from the Eromanga Sea. And that's not to say that other pterosaurs haven't been found in other parts of Australia. But those are the ones that are diagnostic enough to give species names. But there's still a lot of work to be done. I'm going to be heading up to Queensland later this year, and I'm going to be doing some more stuff. So even though I'm wrapping up my PhD, there's still more stuff. So watch this space. But yeah, we know a little bit so far, but of course, there's always more to discover. So hopefully, yeah, there'll be more than five species if I have anything to say about it.
Nice, good. Someone else has asked about pterosaurs in Dinosaur Provincial Park. So we do have species called Cryodracon. So if mummified remains of a relatively intact hadrosaur can be found at the site, is it possible for us to find a mummified pterosaur where the wing membrane was potentially preserved?
Ooh.
Now, funnily enough, we did actually discover two pterosaur bones last year at the site. I think in the Dinosaur Provincial Park, Cryodracon is only known from a handful of bones and really only one or two individuals. So this is some of the first new material of any pterosaur that we've had in quite a long time. It's in press at the moment, so hopefully we'll know more about it soon. We would love to find a mummified pterosaur. I think so far there's been two or three mummified hadrosaurs found and multiple other individuals with just patches of skin. Pterosaurs, I guess, are a bit trickier because they are so fragile. And maybe the hadrosaurs are being preserved with their skin intact because their skin might be a little bit thicker. They don't really have many other defensive structures. So one of the theories is that they develop a thicker skin. But yeah, Del, I guess your research is, and was it Clyde you mentioned is looking into this exceptional preservation. So maybe watch this space and we'll collab and hopefully we'll go out and find a mummified pterosaur.
Hoping. We also have another question in the chat. Maybe Jake can answer this one, which is, how do members of the public get involved with digs in Victoria?
Ah, very good. Dinosaur Dreaming is your go-to. There is a website. I'll put it in the chat. But we have a new revamped website. And on this website, there is all this information about the dig, what we do, where we go, and there's a contact form. And if you fill out the contact form, you will hopefully be contacted for a rookie day. We usually do those around September, October, November, where we'll bring you out for a small weekend, teach you the processes, teach you how we dig. And if we like you, it's not my call. If you are liked and if you do well, you'll be invited to the annual dinosaur dig in February. We usually go early to mid-Feb for a couple of weeks. You can come for minimum one few weeks at a time. And you'll get a chance to have a shot at digging fossils in Victoria. Most of what you'll do is the kind of the rock breaking and processing. You'll get a chance at least one day to work in the hole and help pull some of the stuff out, but you're mostly doing just that collection stuff. There's only a select few who get to use the rock saw and the heavier duty stuff, but that's your best way to do it. They will get you involved. The other alternative is Mike Cleland lives in Phillip Island and does some prospecting trips down the coastline with the Bunurong Centre. I think he still does them. So if you look into the Bunurong Centre, they have little field trips. You can go for a day trip. And yeah, just have a prospect and see if you can find anything. And they'll often show you where the footprints are and where some fossils have been found too.
Cool. And I think as well, if you are willing to pitch in a bit more money or to travel a bit further, the Australian Opal Centre does also run digs similar to this, where you are sitting around a table, you're not going into the actual mines, but you are sorting through and helping us find brand new, often smaller fossils, things like teeth. I think Jake and I have both done that one, and it was very fun. And then the Australian Age of Dinosaurs also runs a dig once or twice a year.
Yeah,
And I think more
twice.
recently, the Eromanga Natural History Museum, which is in a different part of the middle of nowhere in Queensland, is also running digs. So have a look around. There's definitely a few that are available out there.
And if a dinosaur dig isn't enticing enough, often paleontologists are on these digs, and often at least once or twice, one of those nights, we'll give a talk just about some of the research we're doing. So you'll get a behind the scenes look at some of the stuff we're working on. If, digging dinosaurs is as exciting as it is.
Amazing. Thanks, guys. Okay, I'll pitch this to the two of you. What is one type of dinosaur that you think should be in Australia, but we haven't found them yet?
You go first, Del, because this will take me a long time.
Okay, okay. I will steal my supervisor, Dr. Steve Poropat's answer and say a rabacusaur, which is another type of sauropod. We have the right age deposits. They should be here. It would be great to see a little bit more diversity in terms of the big long neck dinosaurs that we find. But yeah, he's mentioned that one before. So yeah. And also, hi Mason. Great to see you. Great question.
I have two answers here. I'm going to go with the easier one first. So, in a recent paper this year, I published on the first Carcharodontosaur from Australia. But they're so Carcharodontosaurs are a group, they get really big, like the tyrannosaurs, 30 million years before they get to that size. Things like Carcharodontosaurus, Giganotosaurus, Meraxes, Marpusaurus, particularly in South America. We have small ones down in Victoria, identifiable by these little hind limb bones. We should have a big one. We don't have like a massive apex predator in Australia. If it's going to be anywhere, it should be in Winton because we think these animals are sauropod specialists. And there's a ton of sauropods. There's no shortage of food. So that's like we have a Carcharodontosaur, but we should have a big one. The one that we don't have and we should is an abelosaurid. And abelisaurids are a group of theropods. If you know things like Carnotaurus, Abelisaurus, Rugops, they've kind of got these shorter, stubbier faces with these crazy head ornamentations. Like Carnotaurus has these two bull horns, Rugops has like a little snub horn on its head, and these tiny little arms. And we think they're kind of adapted for fast running. Again, these are things that got really successful in South America and Africa. They should be here. We haven't seen one yet. There should be one. And probably again in Winton.
Amazing. I'm just going to say pachycephalosaurs because they're my favorite, and it would be nice to have an Australian version. We have no evidence of them existing here so far, but fingers crossed. Okay, I think the last question that I will ask you guys is fieldwork is just one part of the scientific process. So, what kind of things happen after the initial discovery and excavation of a fossil? So, for example, usually we jacket that fossil, we take it back to a lab somewhere, and we use things like air scribes and smaller dental tools and things to prep around the fossil to remove some of that finer matrix, and so it's actually exposed. So Jake, can you talk us through maybe some of the bone analysis that you did for your PhD?
Yeah, so it kind of varies on your quality of bone. So, for example, I had a small limb bone that was just the bottom of a tibia, so part of your shin, and there was none of the shaft, there was not part of the top that articulates to your upper leg. It was just the bottom of it, and it looked really distinct. It kind of had this little arch in it. So you have to kind of pore through literature. You got to look at what everyone else has published on groups around the world. First, you got to figure out what it is. So this thing had hollow bone that said to me, okay, this is a theropod. Like birds, they have really thin walled and hollow bones. So that kind of shortens your range. But there are still at least 350 species of theropod, and then all the stuff that's not named and is still part of a group. And you kind of have to systematically go through and look at what you might have there. Sometimes you can use like a big analysis that tells you specific features and they will be specific to a group. Sometimes that's not helpful and you just have to eyeball it and see what looks like your one. For example, this little shard of the bottom of a tibia took me 3 months to figure out purely by pouring through literature and trying to figure out what it was. But when you do figure that out, then you just do comparisons. You say, okay, here's what it looks like. Here's what ours looks like. Here's how they're similar. Here's how they differ. Here's how our animal is unique. but then you're also limited by isolated bits. When you have something a bit more substantial and complete, you can take that and do a bit more work with it. Things like what Adele's done.
So Dale, do you want to talk us through your kind of naming and publication process?
Yeah, so it's an absolutely massive effort to dig up the bones as we've described, but it's not, where it stops. It's sort of where the process begins, but it's like a massive team effort. And absolutely, we could not do it without the help from citizen scientists, people who haven't, done study at university, but still have this incredible skill set and so much knowledge as well. Like some of the best people that I've been in the field with, they did up to year 10 in school, in high school here, and they just have like hands-on experience. So definitely want to acknowledge that. But then, yeah, in terms of studying the fossils, sometimes we photograph our fossils. Sometimes we send them over to the Australian synchrotron and get them scanned at 1 a.m. in the morning, to try and see what the inside structures are like. So all of that information helps us build up a profile of what makes this animal special and unique. And through doing a lot of reading and comparing things with other fossils that have been found both in Australia and across the world, across time periods, we try and pick out what I think of as special snowflake features, which have the special name of autapomorphies. So normally that's a feature that when you compare like different members of that family, only that species has it. And ideally you want at least a couple, if not more, depending on what group you work on. And then, yeah, then it's sort of back into the trenches, like bashing away at the keyboard and trying to communicate these findings both in a peer-reviewed scientific paper. So you do that, and then it gets sent off, and then peer-reviewed. So other scientists who have similar expertise will be asked to basically evaluate and say whether they agree or not with your findings. And then when it passes through all of those hurdles, that's when we can make an announcement. And yeah, announce it to the world. And yeah, a big part of my work has been partnering with regional natural history museums and trying to get them as much press as possible, because I mainly work with museums that really heavily rely on tourism and communities that really heavily rely on tourism. So that's a big part of it. And then getting to work with them to make displays as well is something I've been really fortunate to do. A lot of fossils don't end up on permanent public display. But Draco, the pterosaur, the first one I named, is on display. So is the one I named last year. And then I just wanted to also acknowledge Michael Collins' question in the chat, which is he asked, when you all publishing books, smiley face. Another part of that process can also be scientific consulting. So I've been a pro bono scientific consultant for a picture book that stars Draco, which is amazing. And obviously, when that comes out, I will be screaming it from the rooftops. But yes, that's a work in progress. So yeah, there's so many different stages as well, and so many different audiences to communicate our findings to. It's not just like the scientific weenies who are experts in the field that can read the impenetrable jargon. For me, it's also really important to, yeah, do the podcast and explain, what we've done. But then, yeah, if we can do it in different ways as well, that's, yeah, all part of the process.
Amazing. Thank you, Del. And speaking of communicating to the public, if there was a question we didn't quite get to today, or you want to know more, we have a number of other events coming up for the rest of the Australian Heritage Festival. Next week, we have an interview with a paleontologist, so you can submit questions to us ahead of time. We'll be talking about our pathways and how we got to become a paleontologist as well. But also send us your most unhinged, crazy questions within reason, and we will do our best to answer them. On the 24th of April, we will also be having a dinosaur or archosaur debate. We're each going to pick a species of Australian archosaur and fight it out on which one is best and why. I think these two are pretty obvious in what kind of animals they would choose, but we'll also give you a bit of an crash course into what other Australian dinosaurs and other creatures were floating around at the same time. The week after, we also have our last online talk, which is about the opalized dinosaurs of Lightning Ridge. where I'll be doing an interview with Jenny Bramall, who is the head of, I think, public programs and collections at the Australian Opal Centre. And if you are Sydney based, I also have one more event at the History Museum at Macquarie, talking about the differences between archaeology and paleontology. And I'll be interviewing another superstar of STEM, Ronica Power. So hopefully you can join us for one or several of those. And if you do have any more questions, please feel free to follow us and get in touch. The Pals in Paleo podcast is exceptional. And if you want to know more about pathways into paleontology, as well as some of the incredible fossil species we have in Australia, definitely check that out. And if you do ever find a fossil yourself and you don't know what to do with it, you can also have a look at the Found a Fossil website and get some guidelines on what to do and who you can contact. So thank you all again for coming. Hopefully we'll see you at the next event, and we hope you have a wonderful day.